good morning or good afternoon or good evening or good whatever time of night or day it happens to be, wherever you happen to be. It's morning for me. This is Liviana coming to you again from New Romulus, so to speak. Um, I would like to speak to you today about what some have been referring to as Gamergate 2.0 or 2.0, if you will. Um, Now, as it happens, the name Gamergate 2.0 has been in use since, as early as October of 2014. I believe, and I'm not entirely certain, but I believe the first person to use this name, Gamergate 2.0, was Mundane Matt. In a video he uploaded on the uh, 24th of October 2015. And then again, he uploaded another video sometime in November of 2014 in which he said Gamergate has to become Gamergate 2.0 and was talking about Operation Skynet. Since that time, there have been occasional rumblings about a so-called Gamergate 2.0. Back in June of 2015, there was some stuff about a documentary by Seattle for Truth that was kind of not really getting much attention or views because there was a lot of political stuff in that documentary, and Gamergate isn't really a political movement. Then there was another thing back in February of 2017, this year, when the PewDiePie situation occurred as a result of some article published in the Wall Street Journal. Some people were going to call that Gamergate 2.0, or at least one person was, but that didn't really go anywhere, and that was I don't know that really qualified as a Gamergate 2.0. Then we had the torrential downpour thing that went on. I guess it was in February of this year, in which there was some stuff about so-called localization, which was really a rather poorly done attempt at localization and what some would later refer to as culturalization, in the sense that there was a Japanese game, Fire. I can't remember now exactly what it was called, but Emblem of Fire, in which the Japanese dialogue was localized supposedly by a means of just 3 dots, 3 dots to indicate an omission or something. Several different scenes went back and forth with just 3 dots, as if nothing was really being said, or they were just looking at each other or whatever. And there was no reason for that. The original Japanese, when translated into English, was not anything objectionable or offensive or questionable in any way, and so it was kind of a joke, really. So, I mean, torrential downpour was apparently some kind of a big thing. I was completely oblivious to the entire affair at the time because I was occupied with other matters. But anyway, that brought some new attention to Gamergate, so that might have some merit to being called Gamergate 2.0. Then there was some other thing about political activism in gaming and gay pride event in RuneScape, and that didn't go anywhere. Nobody really seemed to take much interest in that. There was one or two people who tried to make a big deal out of that. However, more recently, earlier this month in June, there were some things that occurred, and since then, that surrounding E3 and the game called The Last Night and the developer Tim Soray. And then not long after that, we had this Vidcon thing where a lot of Gamergaters and maybe former Gamergaters got together with one another and some people who in the past might have been anti-Gamergaters. And there were some things that happened there. I'm going to talk about both of those things because these have been referred to as Gamergate. Well, let me back up a bit, back to April of the 26th of April or so. Troy Levitt, who's a game developer, released a video called Gamergate Round 2, in which he was talking about Zoe Quinn's new book that would be coming out. I believe it's supposed to come out in August. I'm not entirely certain. Anyway, there are already pre-orders for the book. And then so now up to June, we start with the E3 and Tim Soray and the last night business, and then come to VidCon. And I think that this might be something that might be worthy of the name Gamergate 2.0. I'm not entirely sure whether we should refer to any of these things, however, as Gamergate 2.0. I think that there were some people who believed that Gamergate was over. This little thing about Gamergate is over, Gamergate is a thing in the past, Gamergate is history. There have been people saying this for a while now. But I think that these recent events with Zoe going after Tim Soray and Anita tearing into Sargon show that Gamergate is still very much alive, and there's no reset or re-envisioning or anything of the sort. It's just Gamergate has been here the whole time, and it takes something to get our attention to get the hashtag trending again on Twitter or wherever. I don't think that Gamergate ever ended. I think that we've just been here keeping our eyes open the whole time. And probably, if anything merits a Gamergate 2.0, it would be either this torrential downpour thing or the announcement of Zoe's book and the subsequent events which have happened since then, specifically and particularly this month, with Zoe going after Tim and so forth. Now, I want to point out that Gamergate is not now and never was about Zoe and or Anita and or Brianna. It wasn't about Zoe having sex with several different people to cheat on her boyfriend at the time, Aaron Joni. It was not the fact that that it was she who went after Soray. And I would like to bring up a little sample of a blog post by James Desborough, GrimJim or Grimachu, however you want to refer to him. I think he's known as all of these things in various places. So he did this post back in October, I guess. Let me look and make sure where this is from. It might be August. Yeah, it was August, so it was pretty early, since Gamergate is generally said to have been born or start on the 28th of August, 2014. This post was made on the 31st of August, 2014. So it's back in the beginning, the early days of Gamergate. And the post is titled, "What is Gamergate?" or "What is hashtag Gamergate?" And it starts off with these words. This question seems to be popping up a lot, and there's a lot of obfuscation going on from the social justice warriors, the gaming media such as it is, and others. So here's a quick primer into what's going on, or you could start here, and he gives a link. An indie computer game developer who happens to be a woman, irrelevant, was exposed as having cheated on her boyfriend, irrelevant, with a bunch of guys, irrelevant, who happened to hold positions in gaming media and to have given her all sorts of booster articles and kudos, supremely fucking relevant. There's what the issue is right there. But he goes on. Obviously, this at least looks dodgy as fuck, even if it's all above board and just sexy times rather than payment in kind. It calls into question journalistic integrity, which is what should divide professional gaming journalism sites like Kotaku, Forbes, Vice, and so forth from mere games bloggers and YouTube personalities who are just doing what they do for the lulz and the fun of it. The conflict of interest should be obvious. When this hit, however, it was ignored and or suppressed by most of that same gaming journalism field, which again looks dodgy as hell since it's their ethics and transparency that are under question. And that was, however, just the spark of what has become a more generally skeptical and critical eye that has turned on other conflicts of interests, such as public relations or consultancy businesses also run by games journalists, and long-standing issues with corruption via threats, blacklisting, pre-order culture, etc. in games journalism. Okay, so the blog post goes on for a while, and I will give you a link to this post in the video description here, but I wanted to get that much out of the way so that I can go on to talk about what I wanted to talk about in connection to what Gamergate was and is. Gamergate was not and is not and never was about Zoe and or Anita and or Brianna. It wasn't about Zoe having sex with 5 guys to cheat on Joni. It wasn't the fact that it was she who went after Soiree. In the first case, it was about the nepotism in video games journalism, not her sleeping around. The second was about a games dev expressing the truth about Gamergate, and almost 3 years ago, getting targeted now and harassed by someone else who just happens to be Zoe, the someone else who is holding a grudge and frankly, based on everything that I've seen about her, seems to be a rather abusive individual, but that's absolutely not the primary focus here, if it's a focus at all. As with the first instance, the details of the Zoe post, which I'll link to the Zoe post also in the video description. I frankly don't give a shit how many guys Zoe fucks as long as one of them isn't my guy, right? It's none of my business, and I don't have anything against polyamory, even though I'm not polyamorous myself. There was a time when I thought I was, but I don't know if I grew out of that or realized that it wasn't quite the case because, I do get jealous. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a polyamorous relationship myself. But hey, if that's your bag, far out, go for it. Just leave me and my man out of it. And yes, it's always being abusive and manipulative toward Joni, if that, as it seems. That was bad. But that's all drama, and it's the past. They're over and done with. He vented in the Zoe post, and hopefully he moved on to a healthier relationship. None of that has a damn thing to do with gamers, gaming, games development, and so forth. It's none of our business, as Gamergaters either. What is our business, or should be of concern to us, is the unethical practice of one or more journalists in giving Zoe exposure and good press without disclosing, like, hey, I'm in a relationship with this person. Okay. In a more recent instance, I think it should have been obvious to everyone from the start. I mean, it was obvious to me that the real reason Zoe went after Soiree is because pre-order sales of her book were rather shitty and she wanted to get some attention. I mean, even in the tweets where she went after him, I think the last tweet she posted was, "Oh, and by the way, I've written a book, and here's a link to," I mean, come on, it's just advertising. That's all it was. It was her trying to get attention because her book sales or pre-order sales were kind of lackadaisical, to say the least. And because the book itself is related theoretically to us as Gamergaters, although it's going to be another fantasy and nowhere near a reflection of reality, well, the book then is our business too. But her book should sell, succeed, or fail on its own merits without the abuse of histrionics about something that happened almost 3 years ago. And, it's just, well, let's go dig into this person's past until we find something we can. Let's go dig into everyone's past who's going to be at E3 until we find something we can make about us and, use it to try to sell our book. No, that's just that. No, that's a rather unacceptable type of behavior. As for Anita, the thing recently happened at the Vidcon, where she was on a panel about harassment. And Sargon of Akkad and Mundane Matt and Wizard of Cause and several other people went in and occupied the first 3 rows in one of the sections. And she didn't want to let it go. She had to attack him while he was simply sitting there watching and listening. As for Anita, what can you say? She's someone who has made a career out of trying to turn video games, which she does not even like or play, regardless of more recent claims. She's made a career out of trying to turn video games into mindless and vapid crap. And most of the shit she's said is highly susceptible to criticism. Sargon gave some criticism. Now, maybe some of Sargon's fans did something more. I don't know. Maybe Sargon might have gone a little too far. I don't know. I haven't watched everything that Sargon has ever done. I find some of his videos quite interesting, and others don't really do a lot for me. I don't think the guy is a bad person. I think there are some issues where maybe he could have behaved a little more maturely. But, people are people, and I don't think that he did anything, intentionally malicious toward Anita. He simply offered criticism of her ideals and her claims, and she couldn't handle it. So he went to sit in the front row of a panel she was on, and this at VidCon, there has been a lot of recent building of bridges between Gamergaters and anti-SJWs on the one side, and feminists and SJWs and anti-GGers on the other side. This has all been going on for a little while before VidCon, and some of it continued at VidCon, so maybe Sargon was hopeful that there could be some kind of resolution or rapport to happen with Anita as well, but well, it didn't, because Anita is a self-righteous busybody who will never ever admit she was wrong about anything. And it would be very easy to let these two make the whole thing about them. They both have what I believe to be rather serious personality issues. I am not I am not myself a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I do have a little bit of training and a little bit of experience in the field. I was an intern one semester in which I did do some counseling, and that was not my only training, but it was pretty much my only real experience with counseling of any sort. We had to read 8 textbooks for that class alone, but like I said, that was not my first, and it wasn't my last bit of training in the field of emotional and mental counseling and so forth. But it's not really my field. I do have some training and some experience, but it's not something I would consider to be my own area of expertise or anything. And, it's not really a good idea to diagnose people over the internet or something like that. You don't diagnose public figures without actually having them in your chair or whatever. And I don't have a chair, and I don't really want to. I've got enough stress in my life already without having to deal with other people's stress. Um, so anyway, yeah, I think that they do both have some serious issues. But the moment it stops, the moment all of this stops being about the behavior and starts being about them personally, is the moment they can start howling about harassment and misogyny and slut shaming and so on. And that's not what Gamergate is about. It's never been about that, and it should never be about that. So that's what I have to say about that. None of this has anything to do with those two women, and none of this has anything to do with Brianna Wu. Now, as far as Brianna is concerned, what I have been able to find, the first apparent involvement she had with Gamergate was when she, on the 18th of September 2014, made a sock puppet Twitter account under the fictitious name Drake Harper at BroLols on, the 18th of September 2014. And then, let's see, on the 12th of October 2014, there was an article published in the Daily Mail in which it was alleged that she received death threats and so forth from someone on Twitter called Death to Brianna. Now, there's a lot of stuff concerning all of this. I'm not going to go into that at this time. I mean, if you want to look around, you can find other people who are willing to talk about that. I'm not going to. What I will point out is that the FBI did an investigation into Gamergate, and they found there was no evidence to prosecute anyone for any kind of alleged harassment or death threats or the like. That most of, if not all of, the harassment and so forth that had been attributed to Gamergate was done by people who were not actually involved in Gamergate, or who had at most used the hashtag once or twice, but otherwise appeared to have no connection with the movement. Then there was, on October the 14th, she got into a debate on Huffington Post Live with the guy that was the founder of 8chan board, about Gamergate, and she said that Gamergate was about harassment of female and transsexual critics and game developers in gaming culture, and Frederick Brennan disputed that. Anyway, it looks to a lot of people like Brianna just inserted herself into the entire affair, possibly in an attempt to get attention for herself. I don't know, but I do know that since Brianna decided that she was going to run for Congress and started trying to talk about how she fought the alt-right and won, and equating Gamergate with the alt-right, this is all nonsense. The Gamergate is not an alt-right movement. There was no such thing as alt-right back in 2014, as far as I'm aware. And whatever alt-right is, I mean, it's a name that has several different factions involved that want to claim the name. You've got the so-called ethnic nationalists or white nationalists, which is, of course, another a euphemistic name for neo-Nazis, right? I mean, you've got the Richard Spencer bunch there who are all about that sort of thing. You've got other people who are about West is best type perspectives, and I think maybe Milo falls into that category of just being about Western culture and how they believe it to be superior to any other culture, whatever they think Western culture is. I would have some debate uh, about that if I were willing to debate. I don't generally like to debate because debate is about um, one person trying to persuade an audience or the other person trying to persuade an audience. And it's really about winning, and it's not really about understanding or trying to get at the truth. For that, you need what Brett Weinstein has called dialectic, or what I prefer to call dialogue, which is the Socratic method. Um, where you engage in dialogue, where you start defining your terms that you're going to be using in this dialogue, and um, you go back and forth working on those definitions until you arrive at one that everyone involved in the discussion can agree to. And then you go on and discuss. And in the course of that, you might present logical arguments. Now, a logical argument in the form of deductive logic, if the premise is, okay, let me stop for a second and point out argument. Argument does not mean a verbal disagreement in the technical sense of logic. An argument is a set of statements, some of which are given in support of another. Now, the ones that are given in support, those statements are known as premises, and the one which is supported is known as the conclusion. In a deductive argument, if the premises are all true and there is no variable factor that's been omitted, no evidence or whatever is left out of the premises, and if the form of the argument is valid, then the conclusion must be true, and the argument is then called a sound argument. Not only is it a valid argument because the form of it is, is valid, it follows the rules of inference. The premises are also true, and that makes the argument sound. And that is the definition of proof. You cannot prove anything except by means of mathematics or deductive logic. There is no other proof, okay? Whenever you present a deductively sound argument, you have proven a conclusion, period, in discussion, no point in going on. Now, with inductive logic, what you do is you gather data, statistical data. You observe an experiment, you replicate the process and the result, and you build up a body of evidence. And eventually, there comes a point at which the evidence is so preponderant that the conclusion is very strongly supported by the evidence. And for all practical purposes, the conclusion is, probably true. Very probably true in some cases. So no, you can't prove anything with inductive logic or the scientific method, but you can certainly give a tremendous amount of evidence in support of a conclusion to the point where doubting the conclusion is just basically denialism. Okay, but anyway, I got a little sidetracked there. Like I said, I would disagree with the idea that that what these people are defending is Western culture, because I realize that for a lot of people, Western culture begins with Greece and goes through Rome, and those cultural legacies have had a tremendous impact on the rest of Western societies. True. But Western culture is not one thing, it's several. There are several different cultures in Western societies, and some of them have had a greater influence than others. But I think we cannot ignore Teutonic Norse cultural influences and marginalize them to the point where they're completely irrelevant or unimportant. I don't think we can ignore or marginalize Celtic cultural influences, Slavic, Baltic. There are a variety of different cultures in what is regarded as Western culture. And I think each of those has had some greater or lesser influence, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to regard the influence of the Middle Eastern religion, Christianity, or perhaps, if you will, the Mediterranean religion, Christianity, as something which is now considered by a lot of people to be a major facet of Western culture. And I don't. I think it's a Middle Eastern thing, and I think that the native religions or sacred traditions, to be more precise, of these various cultures of Europe are far more consistent with the underlying culture than the worldview of Christianity. But that is a topic for another time too. At any rate, Brianna Wu decided she was going to run for U.S. representative, and as a result of that, this website that traces deleted tweets from public figures, began to track her Twitter account and keep up with things that she was tweeting out and deleting. So I would like to point out these things here. Now, this is from, I guess it's from March the 11th. Brianna made a claim that, that that Russians had hacked her personal iCloud email with 3-factor authentication, and she wanted to make this about foreign electoral interference. But she deleted those tweets. There were 2, I guess, initially, which she deleted, and then reposted in a longer series of tweets, which were also deleted. I don't know if she ever left any of this up or not, but here is a record of the tweets. I will put a link to the site where her deleted tweets are tracked, so you can go and check them out. At the time that I screenshotted these earlier this morning, these were all on page 9 and 8 of the deleted tweets of Brianna Wu. So a few days ago, I screenshotted the first couple or so of these, and and that at that time they were on page 8 and 7. So I mean, the older tweets are further in, and the newer tweets would be on page 1 or whatever. So anyway, you can go and look at these for yourself, and like I said, they'd be probably on page 8 or 9 at this point in time. That's where they were earlier this morning when I took these screenshots. So they may be a little further back when you go there now, but they are there. So anyway, I don't think that there's any justification for saying that these tweets, that Gamergate is about Brianna. I think Brianna tried to insert herself into Gamergate for whatever reason, and then started making claims about how Gamergate was harassing her, whether anyone was harassing her or not. Trying to make out that it was because she was a woman or she was trans or whatever. And, there are a number of women and a number of trans women and probably some trans men. I don't know of any personally, but there are several people involved in Gamergate who are not cis white males. Sorry, kids, that's just not a narrative that's going to wash. I mean, look at me. I'm a bisexual woman of mixed ethnic origins myself. So, I'm a Gamergater, and I've never had any particular harassment directed at me because I'm female or because I'm multi-ethnic or because I'm bisexual. Nobody seems to really care about those sort of things in Gamergate. The gaming community was already extremely diverse long before any of you people started howling and pissing and moaning about diversity in gaming and diversity in the gaming industry and diversity in games, uh, representation in the development of games and so forth, as far as characters in the games and whatnot. Um, yeah, that's just bogus, horseshit, bullshit, piffle, stuff and nonsense, whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. So, um, I know that some of you on the other side, or one of the other sides, or whatever, would like to try to make all of this about you and people like you, but it's not. The only thing it's about is ethics originally in video game journalism, but I think for most of us now, it's about journalism in general, um, and opposition to externally imposed censorship on games developers and games publishers. Look, Anita, if you're not a fan of video games and you don't play video games because you don't want to go around shooting people and ripping people's heads off because it's just gross, and these are your own words, um, don't come around and start preaching to us about what you think about games and game development and game publishing. Just butt the hell out. It ain't your business. It's not your hobby. Go around and do something else to get attention for yourself. Zoe, this ain't about you either. Um, this is about collusion, and you just happen to be a part of it. So I'm sorry, but it ain't about you. Get over it. And Brianna, seriously, moon rocks? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yes, let's have colonies on the moon that will be a threat to the world, the Earth, because they can throw moon rocks at us. Oh goodness. Wow. Um, so anyway, I mean, uh, do you really think you are qualified to to be a representative? I mean, come on. Oh my God. So anyway, um, so I've said what I have to say. None of this is about you girls or ladies or women or however you want to be referred to. And as a female myself, I can say girls, and I'm not using it in any kind of condescending manner. I'm quite pleased to be called a girl on occasion. Um, but I posted some comments that I kind of read earlier in this video. I posted them in Discord earlier in a private message, and I screenshotted them and I posted them to Twitter. So, I mean, if you guys want to go look at my Twitter, you can see I've talked about these and many other things over a period of time. Now, I've only been on Twitter for less than a month, I guess now, but it's I was there for the so-called Gamergate 2.0 that began with raging about Tim Sawyer having tweeted 3 years ago his support for Gamergate, and the more recent affair with Anita calling Sargon a garbage human. I mean, what kind of a person who claims to be in favor of human rights is going to refer to any other human being as garbage? That's just really, really hypocritical and inconsistent with. And I mean, on a panel about harassment, to sit up there and harass someone in the audience who's doing nothing but sitting there. Oh, I felt intimidated. Whoa, my goodness. You're the one on the panel. You don't have to feel intimidated. There's security there. Apparently, you called them as soon as you noticed that these people were sitting out there. So, I mean, you know, where's this stuff about being a strong woman and being able to stand up to criticism and so forth? Why do you disable comments and ratings on all your videos? And why do you not respond to criticism? I mean, Sargon apparently wants to debate you for whatever reason. Why wouldn't you debate him? I mean, if your arguments are stronger than his, why wouldn't you be willing to debate him? What is the problem that keeps you from acknowledging or um, responding to criticism, and instead decide to refer to it as harassment? Now, I'm not saying that there haven't been some people who may have harassed you. I mean, there is some evidence that there were at least a few people who did. And so, but Gamergate has had for a long time, a group of people who went around trying to make sure that we weeded out the bad actors, people who were going after others and doxing them and harassing them and issuing death threats and rape threats and so forth. So, I mean, um, I don't know that this is really Gamergate 2.0 because I don't think the original Gamergate ever ended. Um, but if some people want to call it Gamergate 2.0, okay, whatever. Um, at any rate, I've babbled on for a considerable amount of time, longer than I thought I would. Honestly, I didn't think I had much to say today, but I'm going to go ahead and beam up and warp out. So until next time, people. Have fun, but stay safe.